Good morning. My name is Corliss Smith. On behalf of Pastor Teresa Soto, worship producer Vincent Rains, and my colleagues who on the rest of the worship team, we welcome you to this worship service with the First Unitarian Church of Oakland. Please turn your camera off while we begin our service and light our chalice and candles. This will allow us to begin with a quiet space. We will turn our cameras on to greet each other later in the service. Please note that we are recording this service, so if you don't want to be in the recording, please keep your camera turned off. For best viewing experience, we recommend that you make certain you have the up-to-date version of the Zoom app on your computer.
Hello, my name is Daisy Kwan, member of the Board of Trustees, and we are glad you are here. We are an intentionally multi-generational, multiracial, multicultural, inclusive, and anti-oppressive religious community. You are welcome here. We invite you to fill out the guest connection card you will see in the chat. We want to be able to support your exploration of what's available in our community that interests you and how you might participate. Welcome. Before we begin our worship service, we have a few reminders. Is that slide up? Great. So there will be a newcomer welcome hosted today after the service by Emily Stoper. There will be a link in the chat at the closing of the service, and all are welcome. This Monday, there will be a First Unitarian Meditation Sangha. This is Foucault's online meditation group, which welcomes meditators of all backgrounds and experience levels. They actually meet every third Monday of the month with prayers of loving kindness, silent sitting, and check-ins and gentle conversation. Please email Carol Emmert at meditation@uuoakland.org to join the email list. And I hope that can be sent in the chat as well. And then join in the fun. There's an interactive UU CO2 drawdown challenge. Check in with Heather, Jeffrey, and other Foucault drawdown team members at one of the half-hour small group conversations that's happening this week, Tuesday through Sunday. It's never too late to start doing the right thing. Please bring your reflections, learnings, dreams, short actions, which we can take together. And then if you are interested, the sign-up will also be through a link in the chat. And then finally, there's the Drum, which, as many of you may know, is the UU BIPOC organization that was established in 1997. We're inviting one and all to join a community worship and fundraiser. The theme is Becoming Human Again and Again. This worship will explore the journey toward our humanness. RSVP with the link in the chat and to register for one of the online events, which will be via Zoom or live streamed on Facebook. I know there are a lot of other things that are happening too. So we do have our online calendar with details for everything that's happening at the church. So for the Zoom links to join church events, you can also email yesplease@uuoakland.org. And again, I think a lot of this will be posted in the chat. So that's all that I have, and we can move on to the chalice lighting. Thank you.
And now Stefan will light our chalice. The words are in the chat if you'd like to follow along. We light this chalice today, symbol of Unitarian Universalism, in part as celebration of COVID-19 vaccines that bring us closer to being together in person, and we commit to the health and safety for everyone, leaving no one behind. We light this candle in recognition of the Black Lives Matter movement and in recognition of the systemic racism that tries to deny the full humanity of Black people and commit to dismantling it with daily action. Peace is a daily, a weekly, a monthly process, gradually changing opinions, slowly eroding old barriers, quietly building new structures. John F. Kennedy. I now invite you to mute your microphones and sing along as we join Susan Kiter and Renee Witten with hymn 389, Gathered Here.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near.
We Need One Another by George Odell. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid. We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone. We need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs. We need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again. We need one another when we come to die and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey. All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us. Now I invite you to unmute your microphones and turn on your cameras as we greet our neighbors.
Wouldn't it be nice
Thank
if
you,
it's
Catheryn.
Hey, everyone.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning.
Susan.
Morning.
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 Hey, how are you?
Laura, Tom,
Morning.
Good morning.
Judith and
Anna,
Carol.
Hey, Marcy.
Marcy.
Hi,
Good to see
Carol.
you.
Hi, Debbie.
Hello.
Hey, Marcy.
Jody, hi.
Hi.
Hi, Dick.
Hey,
Good
John.
morning,
Good
everyone.
morning.
Oh,
Carol.
Good morning,
Nice to
Emily.
see you
Hi,
all.
Greg.
Hi, Judith.
Hey.
Hello. Hi, Mary Jane.
Jody.
Gregory. Yeah.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Susan K.
Hi, Greg.
Hey, Marcy.
Hi.
Good to see your faces.
Hey,
Hi,
Marcy.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning,
Lois.
Jay.
Is Cora here? See you.
Daisy.
Hi, Noemi.
Hi,
Jody.
Kathy.
Hi,
Hello,
Hi,
Deb.
Marilyn.
Hi, Bev.
Hi, Debbie Kaplan.
Well, hello.
Hi, Bailey.
Debbie Brown.
Tara and Tom.
Debbie's.
Hello, neighbor Marilyn.
Yeah.
Hey,
Happy Kate.
good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone. Welcome all. I invite you to please mute your microphones again and turn off your cameras. And I am honored to introduce today our guest minister,
Yeah.
Reverend Sarah Skochko, who will be sharing today's wisdom story with us.
Good morning, everyone. I am so happy to be joining you all the way from Austin, Texas, through the magic and miracle of technology that unites us as Unitarian Universalists, each in our own home, but sharing a sacred space, a shared sacred space, sanctified by our togetherness. It's good to be here. Our story for today comes from the Jewish tradition, and there are many versions of it, but they're all pretty similar. Imagine a village, a farming village, poor in money, but rich in spirit, celebrating the harvest. This year, the village would be honored by a distinguished guest. In some stories, it was a king who was coming to the region and wanted to sample the special wines grown only from those grapes just in that region. In other tales, it was a wise rabbi who would be gracing them with his presence. Either way, a guest would be among them. So this year's harvest festival, this village wanted to put on a really good feast. Now, no family in this village had enough wine or enough resources to provide for the whole village. So the mayor struck upon the idea of having a big barrel of wine. Each family could bring an earthenware jug or a couple jugs and all pour it into the barrel on the same day. This way, everyone could share the same wine. The wealthier or more blessed families wouldn't be the only ones with great wine to drink, and the poorest families wouldn't be the only ones with perhaps the less good wine to drink. And truly, they would be able to showcase the particular flavor of this valley. The day came. But that morning, one farmer had a conversation with his family. "We are so poor," he said. "Surely the mayor can't expect us to contribute the same as everyone else. Surely no one would notice if we brought an earthenware jug full of water. It would be a drop in the bucket in a very literal sense, right? The wine would be hardly affected. What's the difference between bringing one jug of kind of crummy wine? Our wine's never that great in our crummy little patch of dirt that we grow our grapes on. What would be the difference between bringing that crummy jug of wine and a jug of water? It would almost be an improvement to bring the water. And then we could save our wine for ourselves. We have 17 children." His wife agreed. Surely no one would know. So that day, when all the villagers lined up with their jugs, they brought their earthenware jug and kept it a little bit covered. They added their water. No one was the wiser, and they congratulated themselves on their wisdom. The day of the feast came, and truly it was a joyous day to celebrate. The guest of honor was there, and it seemed only fitting, only honorable, that the mayor would pour the first glass of wine for this king or rabbi. Everyone gathered round as they tapped the big barrel of wine, and the mayor poured out the first glass and lifted it high. And everyone saw that it was a glass of pure, clear water. No one said a word. No one looked at their neighbors. Everyone was equally guilty. To his credit, the guest took a sip and drank his water. Everyone drank water that day. And the next year, on the anniversary of the harvest festival, you had better believe that barrel was full of wine. And that is our story for today.
Good morning, church. My name is Kathryn Winship, your worship associate for today. I'm so grateful to be here this morning, despite feeling a bit jet lagged. These past 2 weeks, I was in Baltimore clearing out my mother's house in preparation for selling it. The same house my sister and I grew up in, the same house my mother was living in right before she passed away in the fall of 2019, before COVID placed a hold on pretty much everything. And while I am certainly not celebratory of a pandemic that has threatened and destroyed the lives of so many dear to me, I feel some gratitude for that forced delay in a very painful process. The task of clearing out generations of memories was a daunting one, but I soon learned I did not have to do it alone. Friends I hadn't seen in years showed up and offered help, support, company as I sorted through the piles. After one friend had spent the entire day helping me, I expressed feeling bad that I didn't have time to take him out for a meal as a thank you. He simply said, "No problem. That's what family is for. That's what family is for." I sometimes forget what a truly incredible family I have. I'm in the middle of planning my wedding, which has been a bittersweet experience, not only due to global circumstances, but very personal ones. This will be my first and hopefully only wedding, and I will be celebrating this exciting milestone without parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, or cousins. My family side will consist of one person, my sister Lauren. As my only surviving relative, she'll get the prestigious role of family of the bride. She also has a keen fashion sense and is a fantastic floral designer, so I picked a good one. But for all the loss, we have never been alone. I have always had family. I remember Lisa's son, who came to my graduation and sat through all 4 hours. Sarah, who's never missed a milestone or a Friendsgiving meal. Davi, who flew from Chicago to New York City to witness my ordination as priestess. Masha, who sat vigil with me as my mother passed away. Dan, who I now get to plan a life with. I return home to be reminded I'm set to be worship associate today, and I've never done it before, and I panic. I write to Susan Kiter, who immediately sends me resources, help, and encouragement without any judgment. I remember my choir family. I went to my home group to celebrate my 7 years sobriety, and they all cheered and seemed genuinely happy to see me. I remember my recovery family. I log into Zoom this morning and am greeted by your wonderful familiar faces and feel instantly surrounded by love. I remember my church family. I can't change not having blood relatives, but I can change appreciating the family I do have. And I do have a family, a huge, vibrant, loyal, caring, amazing one at that. So when my wedding happens, I may not have the traditional parade of grandparents and parents, but my family will be there. And for that, I am so grateful. Blessed be.
Dear ones, I invite you to join me now in prayer, meditation, or silent contemplation. Spirit of life and love, eternal mystery that unites us all, be with us now as always, as we hold these beloveds in our care, as we reach out to one another with our hearts and thoughts, as we hold this community strong. Be with us in our sorrows and in our troubles, and comfort us. Thank you for the precious days of our lives and for the joys that help us move forward. Protect our loved ones who we worry about and hold them in your mercy. Preserve always the memories of our beloved dead as we do the same. Spirit, be with us now, as always. This we pray. Amen, and blessed be. Thank you so much to Kathryn for that beautiful reflection, beautiful and touching. I wanted to share with all of you a story too, a story about family. This was told to me by my dear Uncle Lenny, now of blessed memory, and it was told to him by his father, but he carried it forward because it was so important to him. It would have been in the late 1920s because it was before the Great Famine that struck Ukraine and Belarus. And I can't stress to you enough how devastating that famine was. It changed everything. But on that night, before the famine, some young men from my grandfather's village had traveled to another village for a dance. This was a common way for young people in the countryside to have fun. So you can imagine the birch trees rustling in the moonlight, the young men carrying their jugs of vodka and horilka, the raucous greetings at the threshold, the hand-embroidered tapestries on the old weathered walls, a couple of friends playing accordion and balalaika as the young people danced across the creaking wooden floors. And yes, the vodka, poured generously, toast after toast in the Ukrainian tradition. And on that night, there might have been too many toasts because for whatever reason, there was a brawl between the young men of our village and the young men of theirs. And the young men of our village walked home in the moonlight with their bloody noses and disheveled clothes and went to bed. Well, the next morning, Uncle Lenny says, the elders of our village formed a delegation. Now, English was not Uncle Lenny's first language, but that was the word he used, a delegation. They brought with them gifts to apologize to the parents of the other young men. Their youth had been poor guests, my uncle said. Their conduct was dishonorable. They had dishonored the entire village. Now, because this was, again, before the famine, they would have brought baskets of food in apology. I heard this story many times from my uncle. Once I asked, didn't they make their kids apologize? And my uncle replied, what? I don't know. Who cares? Another time I asked, well, who won the fight? Like, if we had to apologize, we won the fight, right? And my uncle looked at me like I were speaking some third language, and my question would have been foolish in that one also. It was irrelevant to the story. Now, I've been fascinated with this story for years because as a Unitarian Universalist, I feel like a member of a village. I guess several villages, first and foremost, my home congregation in Philadelphia, but also the wider village of Unitarian Universalists as a whole. And I've thought a lot about what our village holds to be honorable conduct and how you can tell and what, if anything, we owe the village in terms of our conduct and what I might do if I thought someone else had dishonored the village and whether or not they should care. It's a really interesting and thorny topic. When I was younger, I came to church once with a mohawk, and no one made me feel a bit less welcome. No one said, that's unacceptable here. And so I learned what fell under the umbrella of acceptable and honorable conduct and comportment at church, and that was it. But I've also had people side-eye me when I slipped into a pew half an hour late after a long bartending shift on a Saturday night. Every interaction we have at church teaches us something about what falls under that umbrella of acceptability or not, sometimes for better and sometimes for worse. Now, if you don't think you have a church-related sense of honor, imagine if you drove to church with a friend, and as you were pulling into the church parking lot, they casually opened their window and threw their coffee cup out onto the church lawn, and then cheerfully got out of the car and went inside, as if nothing had happened. What if a bunch of your fellow church members were standing around out front, and when you got out of the car, they were all looking at you? What would you do? Would you go pick up that cup, even though you hadn't thrown it? I would. I mean, I'm also in favor of reparations for the descendants of enslaved African Americans, even though I wasn't alive then. It is irrelevant to the story for me. I'm in the pick up the cup camp because I know I arrived in the same car. Now, to save you the suspense, I'm not going to give you a unified theory of Unitarian Universalist honor. And I'm definitely not going to tell anyone whether or not they've dishonored the church and how you would know. Instead, I hope to just get you wondering about the invisible norms that guide our expectations of ourselves and of each other. We've all come from very different families, from different backgrounds. And from those different origins, we come together to make up this shared space with hopefully shared understandings. And I do think that we hold the whole village to some kind of standard of honorable conduct, even when we don't talk about those expectations. That standard can be for better or for worse. Sometimes it serves us and sometimes it doesn't. It's usually not written down anywhere. You know, the church covenant is not supposed to be an exhaustive list of what you are allowed to do and forbidden from doing. That, for one thing, would be exhausting and pedantic. And can you imagine how petty it would be to put into writing norms like no one shall eat the last Klondike bar in the church freezer without buying a new pack? And yet, I belonged to a church where everyone knew about the Klondike thing. It might as well have been chiseled in stone. I've also belonged to a church where someone spent the entire coffee hour interrogating everyone else to find out who had thrown a plastic fork into the regular trash and not recycled it. And I was so exasperated by their conduct over someone else's conduct that I then intentionally threw my own plastic fork into the regular trash can just to be spiteful. It was not my best moment. But clearly, several understandings of honor were present that day at church. So yes, my goal is to get you wondering. Now, to get back to the story in Ukraine for a minute, over the years, I have gotten a lot of old family stories somewhat wrong in sermons, only to have my dear old dad, who was watching via live stream from New Jersey, send me an instant message on Facebook before the sermon was even over, letting me know that the family had not eaten moss during the Great Famine. It was tree bark that we ate. For him, getting the story right, I guess, is a matter of honor. And with my dear Uncle Lenny now gone, I thought I should corroborate a few things. So I called Dad. Oh, I don't know that story, he said. Really? I asked. The brawl at the village story and the whole delegation, that was very important to Uncle Lenny. He told me that story like 19 times, I said. I asked if the story was plausible. Could it have happened? Well, sure, Dad said. He just didn't remember it. Did your parents never tell you? I asked. I mean, maybe they did, he said. He just didn't remember. So why had one brother seized upon this story from a century ago as being the foundation of our family's very honor, and the other brother either hadn't heard it, hadn't listened, didn't care, or set it aside? Indigenous author Thomas King writes that the truth about stories is that that's all we are. We are our stories. My father explained that his family had had an extremely strong sense of old world honor. He was mostly raised in this country. His brother Lenny, his older brother Lenny, had had a very inflexible personality, one might say stubborn. And he carried with him an unflinching sense of honor from the old country, that you do not disgrace yourself, the family, or the village. I think in his lifetime, it brought him as much conflict and heartache as it did strength and guidance. No one ever lived up to his standards of conduct, and it made him isolated. But the stories that we tell ourselves, the stories that help us understand who we are and what matters to us, stick with us. What are the stories you tell about your family, your upbringing, your village, about your church, about our faith? What are the stories that help you understand what matters? What are the stories that make you who you are? Do you share your family's sense of honor? I asked my dad. And he said, well, yes and no. There were aspects he did, aspects he didn't. And that sounded cryptic, so I pressed further. And he explained that there had been times when each of his American children could be said to have dishonored the family. And I chose not to make an issue of my children's dishonor, he said with a smile. And then I did not press further because I know better. Honor, he said. Honor is not something you can have forced upon you, although Uncle Lenny would like to have think so, would have liked to have thought so. No, it can't be forced upon anyone. You either understand it or you do not, he said. You practice it or you do not, and you live with the consequences. When has your sense of honor had to be flexible? When has it had to be updated based on what you learned about yourself or the world? When have you made exceptions? For whom and why? When has your sense of honor been challenged by someone you loved? After my Uncle Lenny died, we had a memorial at the home of one of my cousins, and the whole family came and brought the food he loved, and we told the old stories in the old way. It was the first time I had met some of his friends from high school, all of them also Russian and Ukrainian immigrants. I asked his friend Oleg, what was Uncle Lenny like when he was young? Perhaps before he became so set in his ways. Oh, he was the life of the party, Oleg said. He played music and sang. He could drink anyone under the table. He was a European-style friend, Oleg said. What do you mean? I asked. In America, Oleg explained, everyone's your friend. You're friends with everybody. In the old country, we had maybe 3 friends. But they were real friends. American friends, Oleg said, if you tell them you're putting a new roof on the house next weekend, they'll say good luck, and they'll mean it. They'll mean good luck. But a European friend, Oleg said, when you tell them you're putting a roof on the house, they'll ask what time they should arrive and should they bring their own tools. Lenny was a European-style friend. He was honorable. Now, you may or may not agree with that dichotomy, and I'm not sure that I do, but I do think there's something to be said for having a rigid societal understanding of what your obligations are as a matter of honor. And for that matter, it's a matter of survival. What do we do when we don't have that structure? What do we do when we have to come up with it on our own? After that conversation, I had a long talk with myself about what kind of friend I was, and for that matter, what kind of church member. I can say for myself, I started making fewer excuses when my friends had to move, for instance, and needed help carrying boxes. And I started putting more energy into the relationships I had with people who could be said to be European-style friends. It seems to me that our sense of honor and our sense of obligation are somewhat intertwined. I have a friend who, at 35 years old, is an Eagle Scout and is still very involved in scouting. And despite being American, despite what Oleg might think, he is the quintessential European-style friend. Whatever thankless drudgery you have going on that weekend, he'll show up and help, whether it's cutting down a tree, helping your middle schooler with math homework, or helping find you a bed at rehab. He'll be there. What's that thing you always say? I asked him recently. A scout is always helpful. No, my Boy Scout friend corrected me. A scout is helpful. Not necessarily always, but a scout is helpful. He said that he says it kind of as a way of avoiding praise for simply doing the right thing in his eyes. When people thank him for being there, he simply responds, a scout is helpful. I asked him about the role that scouting played in him developing a sense of ethics and a sense of honor. And he asked not to be named in this sermon, but he said that scouting is his church, that he hasn't experienced a strong sense of the divine. Now here, I did not tell him that that's not a prerequisite for being a Unitarian Universalist, but he has not experienced a strong sense of the divine, but scouting gave him a system of ethics and the guidelines of right behavior. It gave him that structure. I'm a scout, he told me. It's not uncommon that we'll do a barn raising and 7 or 8 of us will come and help you move that weekend. And unlike the church of his upbringing, he told me, he said that he doesn't have to wait for the afterlife to see the outcome of his participation in that ethical system. The barn gets raised in the here and now, or it doesn't. You see that outcome in the here and now. You do or you do not. You practice it or you do not. And your community lives with the consequences. Unitarian Universalists don't have as concise an explanation as a scout is helpful. I guess saying, oh gosh, all of the principles in a row would take too long. But we do work pretty hard based on our principles to bring about the kingdom of heaven here on earth, in the here and now. And I'm willing to bet that your own understanding of honor has shaped the church, just as I think the church surely has shaped your sense of honor. This coming week, you might pay attention to when you act upon honor and what the consequences are for you and your community. I want to close with one last story. Can I tell the Jimi Hendrix story? I asked my dad when we spoke. As long as you tell it right, he said. It's important. On February 21st and 22nd, 1968, Jimi Hendrix played live at the Electric Factory in Philadelphia. And my father, who was then 19, couldn't go. That weekend, he and his dad had to re-roof the chicken coop on the farm. The coop was 300 feet long and 40 feet wide, and periodically it had to be covered in rolls of big, heavy tar paper. Now, to the Ukrainian immigrant parents of 1968, or any year, choosing this Hendrix person over the family would have been unthinkable. Unless Hendrix were a family member, but then presumably he would have put down the guitar and helped with the coop. It wasn't punishment, my father said. I was the help. They'd come to this country, 2 parents, 3 sons, no aunts or uncles, no grandparents. They were all they had. I couldn't say I've got better things to do, he said. He said he silently grumbled throughout the weekend, but really grumbled, perhaps throwing down the rolls of tar paper a little too hard. He never saw Jimi Hendrix play live. But later, it turned out that his friends who had gone without him had gotten stuck on the sidewalk outside. So many people had shown up they couldn't even get in, and they didn't see Hendrix either. Are you glad you stayed and helped your dad? I asked. Yes, my father said. He remembered that late one day, it was getting to be dusk and they were finishing up. He was sitting on the roof looking around at the farm, and he felt a kind of peacefulness settle on him, as if everything were right with the world, and he didn't know where it had come from. Honor is not something that can be forced upon you, but something that grows within you with each story you tell, with each day that you live into story. And when the stories that guide us, the stories we have written for ourselves, line up with the way that we live and conduct ourselves, something feels right. Sometimes it serves us better than others. I can say for me in my life, I'm grateful for the ways my family, my church, and my various communities have all shaped my sense of honor, even as I figure out what to keep and what to give away. I remain grateful, most of all, that for better or worse, 100 years ago, a delegation from our village wrote a story for us to follow. Without figuring out who was right or who won, the elders of our village went to make amends and apologize. Bound by honor, they showed up to maintain relationships with the people of the next village who would come and help them thresh their wheat, with the people who would come and help them bring in the hay, with the people who would host other dances and festivals in years to come, with the people who would come running in times of crisis. And when the famine came, we lived. Amen and blessed be.
Thank you so much for that. Good morning. I'm Susan Kiter, and it's my privilege to share a song with you this morning. And I just wanted to say, I was thinking I picked the wrong song, because this is about I am light, and I'm not the things my family did, and not the mistakes, and I'm not my skin color. And I thought, wait, this is all about being an individual and not being part of a story or having family legacy or honor that I must withhold. And I realized that for me, I am light is about how I'm connected to everyone, and I am part of all those stories. And this brings me connection to all of you and the big view from way out. If I were out in the stardust, looking back at the planet and the cosmos, that actually helps me feel connected. So I offer this to you in that spirit and with joy. I am light, I am light. 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 I am not the things my family did. I am not the voices in my head. I am not the pieces of the brokenness inside. I am light. I am light. I'm not the mistakes that I have made, or any of the things that caused me pain. I am not the pieces of the dreams I left behind. I am light. Oh, light. I am not the color of my eyes. I am not the skin on the outside. I am not my age. I am not my race. My soul inside is all light. All light. I am divinity defined. I am the God on the inside. I am a star, a piece of it all. I am light. I am light.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you all again for joining us this morning. I'm so grateful to get to share this time with you today and tell you a little bit about why I became a member of the First Unitarian Church of Oakland. In addition to serving as a worship associate, I'm an active member of our pagan interest circle, Circle of Oak, the Crescendo Choir, and the Joyful Noise Band. I officially joined First Unitarian Church of Oakland in December of 2019 after spending a full year singing with the choir and finding delight and inspiration every week in the services. Foucault quickly became a second home to me, a welcoming, creative, and caring family. After partaking in a full year of music lessons, pagan circles, coffee, snacks, potluck, and spiritual enrichment, I decided it was time to commit to the health and well-being of the church through pledging monthly what I was able. This church family has been there for me through sunshine and shadows, and I'm grateful for each and every one of you. I am honored to be with you here today and hope you'll join me in continuing to weave the tapestry of love we call community. No matter what you give individually, take heart that it will be woven with everyone's gifts to create a web of community and sustainability. May we remember that even when physically apart, we remain connected as essential to the interdependent web of all existence and weavers of our collective destiny, our story. Please join us in helping maintain this vibrant community through sharing as you're able. There's information on the screen about all the ways you can give to the congregation. You can also download instructions if you click the Ways to Give link in the chat. Let's pass the virtual basket. I invite you now to please join me as we recite the words of congregational commitment. To the work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love we call community, we dedicate ourselves and these, our offerings. And now I invite you to please remain muted and join Susan Kiter in singing our closing hymn, 1010, We Give Thanks.
I'd like to remind you of the words, as while you're muted, you can join me in singing. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for those gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for those gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for those gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. One more time. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for those gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
Dear ones, indeed, we give thanks for all that we are, all that we have been, and all that we will become. As our time of worship draws to a close, let us extinguish our chalices, knowing still that we are connected to one another. Our closing words come from Martha Kirby Capo, who writes, "Our time together is finished, but our work is not done. May our spirits be renewed and our resolve strengthened as we meet the challenges of the week to come. The chalice flame is extinguished until we ignite it again with the spark of our communion. Go in peace, return in love. Amen and blessed be."